sorry. So when you, I don't remember if when you sign up for Try Hack Me or if it's something that that you kind of fill in later, but sometimes it'll ask you if there's a specific interest that you have in cybersecurity. In my path, I think mine was more on cyber defense. So it's recommending a whole bunch of cyber defense paths. But if you want to do more of the offense, red team stuff, that'll be there for you as well. And of course, you can kind of select from anything. There's junior pen testing, pre-security, cyber defense, offensive pen testing. One of the really cool things that I've seen or I found more recently was that they've partnered with CompTIA, which is one of the certification programs. And if you complete the Pen Test Plus, you receive a slight discount on the actual Pen Test Plus certification exam. So that's one of the neat things if you're planning on doing any kind of certification exams in the future. So today we're going to be doing part of the junior penetration tester. We're going to jump in a little bit here, a little bit later on into the BurpSuite one. So we're going to be doing the BurpSuite, the basics, and then BurpSuite repeater today. There's 3 additional ones, intruder, some of the other ones. It'll be kind of apparent when we start using BurpSuite that there's a lot of different tools that you can use within it. And then there's extender as well. And of course, there's all of these other really great modules that you can kind of go through at your own pace as well. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into BurpSuite. One of the really nice things about Try Hack Me, and one of the things that, especially when we were kind of founding the CyberHawks, we found was that it was hard to kind of get a standardized way for the students to really have an attack platform, because that's a pretty big part of it is using the tools, the cybersecurity tools, to attack certain things. And one of the really nice things that they did for Try Hack Me is they have, if you use the paid subscription, I believe you have unlimited time in this. But if you don't have the paid one, if you're just using free, I think it's an hour, and you can extend it to 2 hours. But you have your own Kali Linux virtual web browser that you can use for all of the elements of the Try Hack Me parts. So that's one of the really cool things about the program. It comes with everything that you need pre-installed on it, which is really awesome. So I'm going to go ahead. I'll be, unfortunately, due to the size of my screen here, it's a little hard to kind of do the split screen. So I will be doing a little bit of bouncing around between the two. But either way, like I said, so you get the attack box, which will allow you, and you can copy and paste if you use it in the separate view. It'll allow you to copy and paste between what the different flags are. And then there's, of course, the target machine. So in each room, not in all rooms, some rooms are just going to be, I wouldn't say skills-based, but they'll be less practical, so maybe they'll be just general questions that you can answer. But in this room, there is an attack box. It'll take a little bit to spin up. So for now, I'm just going to kind of give you guys an overview of what we're going to be doing today. So in terms of what BurpSuite is, it's a really great tool. It kind of has a dual purpose here. Generally speaking, you can use BurpSuite in 2 ways. You can either use it as more of like a quality assurance kind of tool, where you can use it to capture your input packets. You can mess around with them for really quick. Let's say that you have to do a test on making sure that maybe you're only accepting valid inputs. So you can really quickly just create a list of different inputs for your website that you want to push in there. It'll run through all those tests really quickly, so you don't have to manually go in and do anything. So it's a really great automation tool in terms of if you want to do tests on your website. And then on the flip side of that, we can also use it as a cyber attack tool in pretty much the same vein. So let's say that we want to try a whole bunch of different login passwords on a website. We can then just capture that request that you're going to send to the website to sign yourself in, and then you could just feed in a log file with all the passwords that you want to try. So it makes it really quick and easy to do all those sorts of things. And then, as we'll kind of see today, we're going to kind of abuse different parts of it as well. So in this one, I think the first one, yeah, there's nothing in that one. So in terms of kind of what is BurpSuite, I'll try and condense this down. I know there's a lot of text here. One thing I didn't mention at first is that it is written in Java, and it does allow you to do some basic external programming with it. We won't go over that today, but I know some other tools in the future, if you ever kind of want to explore it more, you can. In this part, it's basically just alerting us that there's different levels of BurpSuite. Professional, which is a paid one, Enterprise, which is also paid for, I believe, and then it provides some automated other stuff. And then today we're going to be using BurpSuite Community, which is the free version. And of course, then it's going to start asking us some questions. So just kind of as an example, so which edition of BurpSuite are we using? And I would go ahead and type in BurpSuite Community, submit it, and it'll tell me if I'm right or not. In some cases, they'll kind of consider it to be fairly straightforward, so they won't provide any hits. But in some other scenarios where, let's say, if we're doing an offensive pen testing part, they may add like an extra challenge to it, where they won't really necessarily tell you up front in these general text sessions or their kind of walkthrough parts, and they'll kind of leave it up to you, but they will provide a hint just to kind of get you on the right track for that. And then we have which edition of BurpSuite runs on a server. That's going to be, BurpSuite Enterprise. And then BurpSuite is commonly used when using web applications. And then if I had read through everything, we would have seen that it was also for mobile applications as well. So in terms of the features for BurpSuite Community, there are several main tools that are as part of the BurpSuite set. So first you have the proxy. What basically you're going to do with that one is you're going to intercept any requests or responses when you're interacting with a website. Repeater, which will allow us to modify and then resend those really quickly, and that'll be the main tool that we're going to be looking at today. Intruder is going to allow us to then, they mainly use it for brute forcing. So unfortunately, that's in one of the paid routes. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see that one. But that one's if you're going to want to brute force a web application. Then there's decoder, comparer, and then sequencer, which we really won't take a look at too much today. So if we go ahead and jump into the TryHackMe browser, they made it really straightforward. Since BurpSuite is one of the more fundamental pen testing tools, they did make it one of the really quick ones along the right-hand side here. I believe you can also find it under BurpSuite. So we'll go ahead and let that spin up real quick. Generally speaking, you don't have to really do anything, so it'll ask you whether you want to do a temporary or a new project or existing. You can just leave it with temporary and then just use the defaults, and then it'll go ahead and open up for us. So we'll go ahead and give that a sec. Cool. So it's going to go ahead and open up the dashboard for us. Unfortunately, quite a bit of the dashboard's actually locked behind the premium stuff. I know that pretty much most of the right-hand side of it is. So we actually won't really be using much of the dashboard today. But on the top left here, we get tasks. So you're able to then generate, you can pretty much generate your own tasks. So if there's specific processes or different things that you want to regularly do with it, that you can put that there. There's event log where you can kind of see what you've been doing. And more importantly is kind of what's going on across the top bar here. So you have the dashboard, we have target. Most of these are going to be empty right now because we haven't actually activated it yet. But we'll kind of jump between these as we go through. The ones that we'll mainly be using today are proxy and then the repeater one. And then it may have us do some stuff in project and user options. So we have which BurpSuite feature allows us to intercept requests, and that's going to be the proxy. And then which one would we want to use to brute force, and as I said, that would be the intruder. Fortunately, since we're using all the TryHackMe web browser stuff, it's going to go ahead and it's all installed for us. So we don't have to worry about this as much. If you were running your own Kali Linux on your own local machine, one thing I forgot to mention is that not only can you use their web-based browser, but you can also download an OpenVPN file and VPN in, and you can remote in to their network that way. But in this case, since we're using the TryHackMe browser, we're good to go. As I showed a little bit of the dashboard already. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip most of this, since we're not really going to be interacting with it all that much today. Navigation, like I said, the top bar is going to be mainly what we're going to be selecting through. There's a few different shortcuts. If you want to jump through shortcuts, I believe you can go into user options. I want to say it's in miscellaneous, and then hotkeys. So you can not only set up your own hotkeys for it, but then you can see a lot of the ones that are defaulted within the system. So if you're one of the people who likes to use hotkeys a lot, that's also there for you. Cool. And then options. There's user options and then project options. So user, you can set up different projects at the same time. Most of the stuff that you're going to be doing with Try Hack Me, you're really only ever going to use one project. So anything that you do in users and project, it'll basically be the same. So you're really not going to need to worry about that too much. And so unless... I think I'm going to go ahead and I'll skip these questions for now, and then maybe we'll go back to them if there's interest in the options. Okay, now into the real stuff. So in terms of the Burp proxy, so right now if I go ahead and I jump into Firefox and I go ahead and run it, nothing's really going to change for me. So one of the things for BurpSuite is that you do have to. And there's two ways that you can kind of run the proxy. You can either run it through, there's a browser within BurpSuite, or you can use it as an attachment for the browser that you're using. So in this case, it's Firefox, and then up here, I believe they run through how to download it, maybe, or maybe not. Well, at the very least, for our purposes for now, we'll just go ahead and we'll use. So if we notice up here, there's the Foxy proxy, which is for our BurpSuite, and we'll go ahead and activate BurpSuite. So if I go ahead and I try and revisit tryhackme.com, we'll see that it kind of hangs. And that basically tells us that our request has been captured, and we see here, I'm in proxy now. And within proxy, I see that we've captured that request to the server. If I go ahead and press forward, it'll go ahead and send it out. So let's see. So if I go back to my website, we'll see that now it's loading in that website. I believe, I don't remember if it has captured that response. Yeah, there we go. And so it's gonna capture anything from anything else that browser is trying to go to. So we'll see that there's a lot that it's actually trying to send requests to right now. So if I keep, and I can go ahead and I can forward, which basically allows that request to go through. I'll get the response, and it'll display it on the screen. Drop will just cancel out what that request was going to be. And of course, there is an HTTP history, so I can go ahead and I can look through everything that I had received in case I skipped it accidentally. In addition to that, I can also create some basic rules. So kind of what I had shown from the intercept. So from time to time, that web browser may make some small external requests as well, depending on what some of the parts of that website are going to be. So if I go ahead and take a look, and if I zoom in on the BurpSuite, so right now it's a request to tryhackme.com, which was what I wanted. I go ahead and let it forward. And now it's trying to send something to googlemanager.com. Well, I don't necessarily, well, this is for refer, but I don't necessarily want to capture everything from everything that it's pulling from. I only really, a lot of times, I only really just want it from that one target website. So if I go into options, I'm able to not only change the listener, but I can also add in a specific URL, and I'll show how to set this up later. I believe it's in target. I can also set a scope. So I'll show it later, but I can add a scope which will allow me to only filter according to what the specific targets that I want are. So it really kind of speeds things up and it filters it out really quickly. So send an intercepted request to a target, so that'll be forward. And then the key bindings, if I go back into user, I believe it's to send it to forward. I believe it's just control plus F. Yeah, forward the intercepted proxy message. In case you're ever doing anything with an HTTPS message, so far, and I think actually the TryHackMe website is HTTP it does have a certificate. So if you were doing a local Kali Linux install of this, one thing to note is that it doesn't automatically have the HTTPS configured. So you will need to download a specific certificate, and that's essentially what this is having you do. So if you're using the TryHackMe stuff, you can just go ahead and skip this as well. And that was the same thing, since it's already set up for us. And then finally, we have the BurpSuite browser in terms of at least the basics. Like I said, there is, so right now I'm running it through Firefox. I enabled the BurpSuite through the settings here. If I wanted to, I could also use the BurpSuite's built-in browser. So if I go back over to the proxy, intercept, I can go ahead and open my own browser. Now, by default, this is going to shoot an error at me. I believe it's because we're not using sudo privileges. I think it's just because we opened it. We can, I believe, disable that with, I think it's down here. Give me one sec. You can disable that in project options. Let's see. Oops. Miscellaneous, and then embedded browser, and allow the embedded browser. Just be careful with that if you're ever doing anything. If you download, I believe they mentioned, if you get compromised in your browser, it basically they can then access your whole machine. So just be careful of that. Most of the time, you're just doing something on something that you're targeting something specific. So there's really not always that much of an issue with that. But just be careful with that if you plan on using the built-in browser. But generally speaking, and I'll be doing this, I'll use the Firefox one, and there's no issues with that. Like I said, we can set up a scope. So with the scope, that'll allow us kind of what I showed, where there was a whole bunch of just garbage that I didn't want, there wasn't anything that I needed. I can go ahead and set up a scope. So if I go into target, I can go to scope. So in this instance, I had already set up a target machine. So in this case, its IP address is this. So let's say I only want anything from that. So if I go into scope and I add it, so HTTP, oops. Go ahead and just answer yes. And we'll see that it's enabled it here. All we need to do then is then go in here and in the options within proxy, make it where it's and then in target scope. So we'll notice that, so if I go ahead and just forward everything, I'll clear this all out. If I then go ahead and try and go back to TryHackMe, I won't have that same problem that I did before. So it went ahead and it just loaded it, and we'll see in the proxy itself, we'll see that there's nothing there. But if I then go to the website that I have in scope, it'll go ahead and hang as expected. So right now that request is stuck within the proxy, and if I want to view it, I have to press forward. Another really good tool is the site mapping. So let me just go ahead and check. So if I go back here into target, I can basically take a look at, it's going to try and figure out what some of the different sites within that, what are the different extensions of that URL that I'll get. So in this case, if I look at this target here, so if I'm going to go ahead and split this so we can kind of see what's going on both ends. So I have this website here, and I get Bastion hosting, so this is the website. I know that obviously there's just the default, there's the no additional typing, it's that, but I can also then see, based on what the home page has, it's going to figure out some of the ones that it can then jump to. So in this case, BurpSuite has figured out, okay, there's a /about/contact/privacy/products, blah, blah, blah. Now, if I try and go to, let's say, I think it wants me to try and go to contacts. It basically, there's a suspicious page that'll give us a flag. So I think it's in about. So if I go ahead and go back to the proxy and forward it, it'll update it. So we see that it's not only got about, but now we have about 1, about 2, about 3, and so on. And so maybe if I go to contact, maybe we'll kind of build this out even more. So if I jump back over to target, contact didn't have anything extra. If I go to support, we get some more stuff, ticket, and then if I go to products, we'll start to kind of then fill it out. And as we see here, we get this weird one. We get this 5YJ. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to jump over to it. And we see that we get a flag. So if there's, I believe this only works if the page it'll have the different URLs if you need to jump off the different parts of that same page. So it's basically just kind of going through the HTML code and grabbing it from there. But in this case, we go ahead and get that. And then finally, we have, there's vulnerabilities that we can also take a look at. I believe that's under issue definitions, which I believe is in target. So that'll give you basically a description of different security concerns that you can find. So in this case, OS command injection, SQL injection. The question that they're looking for here is, I believe, JavaScript dependency? Yeah, JavaScript dependency. So if I go ahead and look through it a little bit. Yeah, let's go through name. Oh, vulnerable Java, I see. So that'll be down here in V. So if, yeah, here, vulnerable JavaScript dependency, and that as a low severity. And then the final one for the very basic introduction is they're going to have us do a very simple cross-site scripting attack. So basically what they're going to try and have us do is they're going to try and get us to run some very simple code, a very simple JavaScript code, get the website to report that back to us. So we see here, if I go over to support, I'm going to go ahead and for now, I'm going to turn the proxy off because we don't need the proxy for this, or we will in a minute, but I at least want to get over to the page that we need. So if I'm in products, I need to get over to support. And we see here, so if I turn intercept back on, essentially what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and get this script to run. If we were just to use this as a proof of concept, we would then get it basically to print out on the screen successful XSS. And that'll tell us that maybe we can use that to gather more information on what's going on in the backend. So as we can see, I'm trying to type it in here, and it's actually preventing me from doing that. So there's a very simple tool that the website's using that's going to try and block me from getting it to basically run this JavaScript code. To get around this, we actually are going to use BurpSuite. So if I do a legitimate attempt, so this is a query. If I send in a legitimate one, and I see here, so I've captured it on the left-hand side. I think that's the first one that we're going to take a look at. If I see here, I see the stuff that I'm going to want to send in. If I then replace it with what I want to use and then forward it. Okay, why did you not work? Give me a sec. And I then send it, we can then evade that tool. So what it was basically doing was it was relying on the browser basically to prevent me from executing this JavaScript code. But because I then just directly used the actual HTTP request, I was able to evade that and get past that blocker. And so we see here we get a successful XSX. If I go ahead and press all the buttons here, it'll go ahead and just kind of fill through it as I go along. So before I jump into the second lesson, does anyone have any questions on just the basics of BurpSuite? No? Yeah, go for it. So the main difference would probably be that with this one, and maybe it'll kind of be a little bit clearer with the second thing, is that I can not only capture those packets, I can then directly modify them before sending them off. I don't have to double check with Wireshark. I'm not as familiar with Wireshark. I just know just how to do basic queries and stuff like that. But then I can also use some other tools within here. We're going to be using the repeater in a second here. And I think it's a little bit easier to use that way. So rather than just gathering those requests or blocking them with Wireshark and then sending them out manually, I can just use this tool to quickly do it. Yeah, more advanced for the purpose. Right. Yep. Any other questions? Alrighty. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kill the machine for the basics, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump over to repeater. Oh, what? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump back to those that I skipped. Sorry about that. I don't think I need... Yeah, go for it. I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the stuff that I skipped was mainly just some, I think this one, I think the only one that I really skipped was options. And then if you're still trying to work through some of these here, I am recording this, so we'll have the recording available in case you want to just go back and see what I did. Okay. Cool. And this one's relatively short as well. So if we need to go back to the other one, I'd be happy to. Cool. So with repeater, so the difference, so the first one that we did, that one was mainly just using the proxy. So the proxy will use it to capture any of those HTTP packets that we're trying to send out, and it's fairly simple. We're going to be using what's known as the repeater. So if I then, let's say that if I go back, I know that right now I have in target, my scope is currently still with that original one. So just if you did set a scope on the first one, remember to either add on the second machine that we're using for the repeater module, or remove the limitation. So if I go into options and I remove this checkbox here for and, I'm then able to then just use it as normal. So if let's say that I go to google.com, we'll see that it's going to capture that. It's already going for me. We'll see that it's starting to capture google.com again. So if I keep going, and I have google.com again. So I've reverted it back to the default. What repeater is going to do is if I go back to google.com, I can right click on the packet, and I can send it over to the repeater. And basically what the repeater is going to do is that if I can basically hold on to that request, and I can send it out as many times as I want. So if we saw previously when we were using the proxy, we'd have to go back to the page again, get the proxy to capture it, and then do what we need to do. but the repeater is going to hold on to that packet, and then we can do any of the modifications we need. So if I send it, and then not only that, but I can also look at the response. And I can look at the response in a few different ways. Unfortunately, with render isn't working, but I can look at it with raw, I can look at it in hex, and I can look at it in pretty, which is essentially just the HTML code. And like I said, I can modify this. So in terms of the get, I can change where it's heading. I can change some of the different settings for it. So my machine's already gone ahead and spun itself up. So I have 10 dot. We're going to want to go here. If I go into the proxy and I let it keep going, I believe it's the same website that we were looking at before. Yeah, it was the same website, but that's okay. I am going to go ahead and reset up the scope. So I go into target and then scope. I'm going to go ahead and add HTTP. I'm going to go ahead and take an extension. And then I go back to proxy, re-enable and then it'll only grab anything from this website, so I don't have to have a whole bunch of garbage. So if I see here, I have just the initial request to grab the information on this page. If I go ahead, I know that there's a site called options. Oops. I'm gonna send that over to the repeater. So I send that over to the repeater. And I know there's a page called options, or we'll do about. So about. So if I go ahead and just do that very simple change, it'll send me, I can very quickly kind of get a different response than what I had before. And if I go back, it'll change it back to just back to the original page. So if I go ahead, I believe that I covered everything for here. I go into basic usage. I've used the proxy, I've captured a packet, and then I've sent it over to the repeater. So now that I'm in the repeater, so if I look here, we'll see the one that they want us to use is just this example of connection close. So if I go in here, oh, come on. Oh, that's the response. Whoops. So if I go into so if I look in the response here, if I go to connection and it says close, if I go back to the request and change it to open, send, we see the response has changed over to keep alive. So that's just a very quick example in terms of how can we use that repeater to very quickly make small adjustments to what we're trying to crawl through. And it'll be a little bit clearer in terms of how we're going to use that in a second. You can technically do all of this using the proxy, but like I said, you'd be doing it one thing at a time. So if I wanted to very quickly kind of brute force this and see what was going on, I can use repeater rather than having to visit the page over and over again. I've already kind of shown the response, but I can not only use pretty, which is just the standard HTML code, raw, which is also very similar, hex, but I can also have the render it within BurpSuite. I don't know why this one, normally it's nicer. Maybe if I go back to close. Okay, I don't know why that one's not happy, but it's not happy. But normally it will then it'll literally, what we're seeing on the right-hand side here, will populate inside the BurpSuite itself. Which view will response? An additional nice feature of it is that I can use inspector. So in here, if I go back to the request, so there's a whole bunch of different attributes here. So you have host, user agent, accept, and I can view that a little bit easier on the right-hand side here. So if I go down to the request headers, I can see the host is the IP address that I'm targeting. The agent is, I believe, Firefox. And that this is basically, most of this stuff here is just the handshaking with the website, the web server, to agree on certain properties for my browser to be able to use it. But one of the nice things that we can do in here, I don't know if it has us do it yet, But I can also add on additional request headers. It's a little bit harder. Basically what you would do here is if you suspect that there's an attribute that you can't necessarily see, it's on the back end, maybe it's hidden behind another page, you can then add in that attribute and get something back. I'll show that in a second. It's not, obviously the coder on the other end would have had to have the header name the same thing, so it's a little harder to practically use it, but they'll have us do it here. So here we see, so I've captured the request, I've already sent it to the repeater, I'm in the inspector, so I see here, and I'm adding in a new request header. So here they want to have me manually add in the request header of flag authorized. So I'm going to go ahead and add in flag authorized, and it wants me to add in a value of true. So go ahead and add in the value of true. It's going to go ahead and add that automatically into my request. And if I send it, I get the flag back. So it basically allowed me to receive something that I wouldn't normally have been able to do just with the website itself. So I can go ahead and I can copy the flag that I received and add it. So after that, then we get onto the actual, the last two things that we're going to be doing today are two practical ones. So like I said, the main advantage of Repeater is that it allows us to very quickly make some changes. So if I go ahead and I'm going to garbage out the new one. In this case, it wants us to go into products. I'm going to go into proxy. I'm going to forward products, and I'm in products. If I go into see more, we'll see that we've received products and then /1. So what that tells us is, okay, well, maybe let's say there's like products /2 or something like that, right? So here we see we've changed it. Now it's managed hosting. Maybe that's their product. But what essentially they're going to have us do is we're going to try and get an error message back from the server. And the reason that we're going to do that is sometimes when you're not careful with your error messages, sometimes you're going to give away too much information. So maybe there's something on internally, you're messing around with it, you're trying to make it work, so you add in all these error messages naturally to try and figure everything out. But from an attacker's perspective, I can then use that information to figure things out about what's going on behind the scenes. So we're not going to directly, in this one, we're just going to try and get that error message. And then in the next challenge, we're going to see how we can use that to gather some information on the back end. So here we see, okay, so here we have products 2. So the thing that they're trying to lead us towards is, so if I go back and I send this over to the repeater, so if I jump into the repeater here, we see that I can very quickly change this. So now I'm in 3, and that gives us an OK response, so it still worked. 4, so naturally I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try a whole bunch of different things. On the back end, there's some function that's checking to see if it's a valid URL that it's gonna go ahead and send me to. So let's say, for example, rather than sending in a number, I'm gonna send in ABC. We get a 404. Okay, so we get a not found error. Maybe I just add in a whole bunch of zeros, make it really, really long. Okay, still another 404. So let's try maybe a negative. And we got an internal server error. So out of those ones, so I tried letters, and it caught it, and it said, okay, so that's not valid. I tried a really long number. It said, okay, well, there's not a page for that. But then I tried a negative number, and they didn't screen for that. So I ended up getting an internal error out of that. In this one, it's just going to give me this flag here, which I'm going to use for this. But as an example for that, we'll see in a second exactly how I can use that error. So in this one, we're basically going to use, we're going to launch an SQL injection. They're going to walk us through it so we don't have to worry too much about some of the specifics behind how that's going to work. But essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to gain some information about the backend database that they're running their servers. So in this case, they're going to have us go to about/2. If we go back to my proxy, go back to the proxy, and I want about/2, so I'm going to go ahead and send that over to the repeater. Okay. So I've gone ahead and done that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out if it's querying a database when I do that. So if I go ahead and send out just with an apostrophe, we'll jump into the responses and we'll see we get an internal server error. And I believe if I go down, I'll try and see the specific function that it was calling. So if I go down, let's see. Here we go. Invalid statement. So it's trying to grab some information from a database, and we see that it's selecting these columns out of a database called, or a table called people, and it's trying to figure out where that ID of 2 apostrophe is. So we've actually gained quite a bit of information from this error message. We've learned that there's a table called people in here, that it has columns last name, first name, PFP link, role, and bio. So now what we want to do is we want to kind of find out a little bit more. So we see here that code. And like I said, it's querying those 5 columns. But now we want to kind of find out a little bit more. So what they're going to do here is they're going to have us go here. And the reason that they've changed it from 2 to 0 is because 2 is a valid response. 0 is the admin one, which we don't have access to. So, we won't get as, it'll basically help it clear it up for us. So with this union, essentially we're adding in an additional SQL database request, and we're going to try and see if that's going to give us more information. So if I go ahead and send that off, and I go into the response, we see that another column that we didn't see before was called ID, and so we're able to then, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, right. So with that, then essentially what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and gather, we're going to try and pull some information from that. So that's what this next one's going to do. Oh no, this one's just going to tell me the other columns. I don't remember specifically why they didn't start with that one. But this will tell me all of the column titles. So I have ID, first name, last name, PFP link, role, bio, notes, and none. So in this one, what they're trying to do is, okay, so we've gathered the information that there's these columns, so ID, first name, last name, role, bio, and notes. So the thought process, at least from the hacker, is, okay, well, can I kind of figure out what's in that notes? Maybe in a different example, maybe there's like an amount in a transaction or something like that. Maybe I want to figure out how much these people are transferring monetary-wise. And then I would try and target that specific value instead. So in this one, all we want to do is rather than just query and find out what's in the table, I want to know what that person's notes are. So here I'm going to go into notes. I'm going to try and select from that notes. I don't care what the other ones are. And I want to know who ID is one's notes are. So if I go in and I go back to my request and I replace it, I send it off. In this case, let's see. In this case, the note is just another flag. But theoretically, if this was a real practical example, and I was trying to use it to then hack and gather information on a target, I can use it for that purpose. I can gather whatever that person's notes were. Maybe it was something else within the database. Maybe, I guess more seriously, maybe it was like your social security or something like that, if it was really poorly constructed. So on. And then if I were to, I don't know why, oh, I forgot to hit the first one. But unlike the other one, I've gone ahead and I've run through all of them, so it'll give me, I don't know why it skipped one. Oh, I skipped one. It'll give me a nice little congratulations that I finished. And I can also kind of, if like, let's say that I wanted bio, I don't know if they made bio information. Let's see. Here we go. So they made bio information. So I can adjust that if I want to kind of find out more information. So I know in his notes he put the trihackney flag, and then I'm gonna find out information. So currently we have the CEO's bio, so we were able to get his information. But that's a quick overview of BurpSuite. I know we didn't. Unfortunately, we're pretty much we've got about maybe 10 minutes left, so we don't have enough time to look at any of the other really known. Intruder's a really good one because that one allows you to do brute force attacks. So that's a really good one. So unfortunately, we don't necessarily have time to run through that one. But overall, I hope this kind of gives you all a good example of how BurpSuite can be used. Some of the more rudimentary tools with it. Like I said, in more of the enterprise options that they have, so more of the paid subscription stuff, you could do automation with it. So if you just want to make sure that maybe your quality assurance is up to speed, and making sure that they're not leaving certain elements like this here, maybe SQL injection, and maybe brute force or whatnot, you can kind of do it from that. So does anyone have any questions on the repeater or anything that I covered so far today? Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for WiCyS for inviting me to give this today. So hopefully